Bible study. My name is Kent Philpott, pastor of Miller Avenue Baptist Church in Mill Valley, California, at San Francisco Bay Area. Okay, we're in Mark chapter 9, beginning of verse 14. We have two very interesting stories, and you're going to be shocked, I'm sure, at least by the first one. But the first story is healing of a boy with an unclean spirit. And then Jesus again foretells death and resurrection. Now the first one is very difficult to kind of explain, because I have the idea that unless you've been involved and have first-hand contact with this, you're going to find this very, very difficult to understand or even believe. And if you feel that way, I understand, because I went through the same experience myself, even while I was a Christian. Okay, boy with an unclean spirit. We're talking about demon possession. Demon possession. That is, there are unclean spirits, there are demonic spirits. In the scripture we find Satan and a whole host of Lucifer, named Satan, rebelled against God, were expelled from heaven, and they became unclean, evil spirits. Now, I have never understood that. I rejected it even when I was a seminary student, until I could no longer not believe it because I got involved with it. And but here it is. And this demonic force that exists, we don't know a lot about it. The fact that it's there is very, very clear. And we find occasions of it in the New Testament. Now, prior to the period of the New Testament, in various places in the world at that point, there were people who were exorcists. They were practicing it. People made a living out of it. It wasn't anything to do with Christian. It was moving them around. It was fake. It was a very strange thing. But, you know, shamanism developed 30,000 years ago in Siberia. Covered so much of the different parts of the world. Shamanism, very popular today. And they deal directly with evil spirits. They don't always say they're evil spirits, but they are. And so we find this situation. We find 6 times in the Gospels where Jesus cast demons out of people. We're going to be looking at one in this program. Very interesting. So, there are so many pathways. One of my little books is called Pathways to Darkness, how this happens. And I'm going to give you a little list of some of the things I cover. I cover yoga, meditation. Some of it is okay. I've even practiced some of it myself, but it can get weird. Psychic empath, Reiki, Akashic records, Kundalini awakening, third eye awakening, ancestral medicine, tarot, channeling and mediumship, crystal healing, astrology, the Ouija board, the Enneagram, and shamanism, and Santeria, which has produced the curanderos today, which are every place. There's one curanderos a mile from where I live. So I wrote a book on that to make people aware again, and there's a lot of books on that very subject. I'm not the only one by any means, who understand the reality that there are unclean spirits. Okay. And in Mark chapter 6, verse 7, we find that Jesus gives his followers authority, gave them authority over the unclean spirits. Okay. So, we are in Mark chapter 9, verse 14. And I don't mean to scare anybody by this presentation, but just the opposite, that there is freedom in Christ. We'll see. Verse 14, chapter 9. And when they came to the disciples, now, before the program before this, we have Jesus, Peter, James, and John up on the mountain. the transfiguration. Now they're returning to the other 9 apostles. Okay? They're coming to the disciples, the other 9. They saw a great crowd around them. They came down. There was a bunch of people around these 9 guys, the other apostles. And scribes arguing with them. Now, a scribe, they were the PhDs in the law. They were most of the time Pharisees. They were the legal experts. They were the lawyers. But they were the sophisticated ones who really were of power. And here we find the scribes. Jesus is away. They're arguing. Notice the word arguing with these 9 apostles. Verse 15. And immediately all the crowd, there's the scribes, there's the 9, and there's a lot of other people. And all the crowd, when they saw him, that's Jesus, were greatly amazed and ran up to him and greeted him. They saw Jesus coming down with Peter, James, and John. Here are the 4 of them. Here comes. They're returning, okay, down from the mountain. And so when they saw Jesus, it says they were greatly amazed, and they ran up to him and greeted him. So this is a very interesting circumstance here. Verse 16. And he asked them, that's Jesus asked him, what are you arguing about with them? Now, when I first started looking at that, I thought, Jesus didn't know what was going on. Wait a minute, he's God. Well, we forget something, that the Word became flesh and dwelt among us full of grace and truth. The Word became flesh. Okay, up on the transfiguration, here they saw Jesus as he would have been prior to the incarnation, his becoming flesh. But here he is, and so they saw him, and Jesus asked, what are you arguing about? It reveals that Jesus became human being. He was God in the flesh. The Word became flesh. This is a point of contention, or not contention, disagreement among some Christians. That some say, well, he had all the natural powers. He knew exactly what he was doing. And others say, no, he had left that and had really become a human being. He went to sleep. He ate. He walked around. He did all kinds of stuff. Engaged with people. A human being. Both God and man. That's the great paradox. But that is the mystery of who Jesus is. When they saw him, were greatly amazed and ran up, greeted him, and he asked him, what are you arguing about? Verse 17, and someone from the crowd answered him. So all of a sudden now, things are changing. There's going to be a question. Somebody is there, and he pipes up. He says, teacher. That's the word he uses for Jesus. Teacher, because that's the primary work that Jesus did. You find that most of the time, Jesus was trying to get away from the crowds with his disciples and teach them. Jesus was essentially a didascus, a teacher. He says, I brought my son to you. He was bringing his son. Luke says, my only child to you. For he has a spirit that makes him mute. He has a spirit that makes him mute. I know that this is a little hard for most people to understand, particularly if you're new to the Christian faith or you're not familiar with the Bible very well. This is going to sound strange. It did to me when I read this when I was first a Christian. I became a Christian when I was 21. And I read in the New Testament, and a lot of it I didn't come close to understanding. But here it is. He has a spirit. It means a dumb spirit. A dumb spirit makes him mute. He cannot speak. Verse 18. And whenever it, notice it, it's not whenever he or whenever she, whenever it seizes him, it throws him down, and he foams and grinds his teeth and becomes rigid. Those are the symptoms of what may be described as the grand mal seizure. Those are symptoms of the grand mal seizure. Some have said, oh, this is an epileptic experience. An epileptic experience. So we have commentators coming up with different ideas as what is happening here. But it's very definite mess for this father and for this kid. And so it says, the next sentence, so he's talking to the father, says, so I asked your disciples to cast it out, and they were not able. And they were not able. Now the word cast is ekbalo. Ek means out, ball. We have a ball. We throw a baseball, a basketball, a football. Okay? And the disciples can't cast it out. They were not able. Nobody knew why, and no reason is really given. Even in the commentaries, I found nobody that was going to set forth an idea about why. Because I have been involved in this ministry, we call it deliverance ministry, for 50 years, I can understand it because I've had that experience too, where we thought we were going to be successful with someone who came to us, wanted help, they knew they had demonic spirits, and we were able to do it. And I can remember some of those instances, and it was a very sad circumstance. That didn't happen a lot, but it did happen, and I've known it happen to a lot of people. But here it was, the disciples were not able. We're not told why. Verse 19. And he answered them, O faithless generation, how long am I to be with you? How long am I to bear with you? And he says, bring him to me. Now, these are not complaints. It's the way it comes across in the English is different. It is an expression of sadness on Jesus' part, both for the young man and his father, the young kid and his father, but also for his disciples, that they were failing at this. They weren't able to get this done. Okay? So that's part of what is read here as I understand it. But Jesus says, bring him to me. Bring him to me. So that's, you just see that Jesus wants to help this father, wants to help this boy, and so he's willing to do it. Okay, verse 20. And they brought the boy to him. And when the Spirit saw him, that is, saw Jesus, immediately he convulsed the boy, and he fell on the ground and rolled about, foaming at the mouth. What? Now, you're going to hear me say some things, and I don't care if you don't trust me or believe me or not, but I have seen this any number of times. I happen to have written a master's thesis, a manual of demonology and the occult, published by Zondervan Publishing House, 1973. Became a bestseller, and we had people come from all over the United States and foreign countries hoping to have demons cast out of them. My background was psychology, 2 degrees in psych. I was going to be a school psychologist in Sacramento. I went into the ministry instead. Sometimes I think I should have gone into become the school psychologist, but I didn't. And I doubted this sort of thing. I heard about it. I read about it. I thought, come on, man. It's psychological. It's emotional, physiological. There's all kinds of reasons that go together. But they thought it was demonic, spirits in them. Not so. I have seen this on dozens, I'm going to say hundreds of times. I don't care if you don't believe me or not, but that's the truth. We created so many, we had 12 teams of people we had to develop to do this ministry to handle all the people that were coming to us. And I've seen this exactly what happened in verse 21. And Jesus asked his father, how long has this been happening to him? See, Jesus doesn't know everything. Remember, the Word became flesh. He asked him a question that was genuine. How long? Jesus doesn't know. He might have prayed and asked the Lord for help, but the Father for help. But how long has this been happening? Jesus didn't know. It presents a puzzle to us, and some have a hard time accepting it. To me, I just say, I don't know what's going on. He said, from childhood. From childhood. How old the kid is, we don't know. I'm gonna speculate in the neighborhood of 10 years old, just based on a number of different factors, which I don't have time to go into. Verse 22, and it has often cast him into fire and into water to destroy him. I'm not going to go into some of my episodes that I have directly dealt with, but this is a little unusual, but that sort of story I have heard before. And it's okay if you don't believe me. It's all right. It says, but if I can do anything, have compassion on us and help us. So this is, the Father is reporting to Jesus what has been taking place, okay? But if you can do anything, have compassion on us and help us. And Jesus said to him, if you can, and what it means, that word if is a first-class condition. There's 4 kinds of ifs in the Greek New Testament. If you can, Jesus is saying, yes, I can. That's the proper translation. Yes, I can. All things are possible for one who believes. All things are possible. And that's, so Jesus is saying to him, I believe we can end this. Verse 24. Immediately the father of the child cried out and said, I believe. Help my unbelief. What an honest guy. He says, okay, I believe you, Jesus, but I can hardly believe it. All at the same time. You know, that mixed kind of an emotion. Help my unbelief. He admits his inability to grasp what's going on. Verse 25. And when Jesus saw that a crowd came running together, oh boy, he rebuked the unclean spirit. In other words, he told him to shut up. I've done that many times, dozens of times, more than that. Unclean spirit saying to it, you mute, I mean deaf, dumb, not able to speak, and deaf spirit, can't speak, can't hear. I command you to come out of him and never enter him again. Never enter him again. Now, I know that that's hard for you, many of you, to believe what I've just said, and I'm running out of time here, but I would just say that I'm going to tell you one little thing. Many times, early on in casting out of demons, we would just cast them out, come out of them in the name of Jesus. Later on, we learned not to do it that way. Come out and go to the pit of hell. As our statement we'd have. We'd say, go to the pit of hell. Now, I'm going to tell you something. If you don't believe it, that's okay. That's okay. I understand. But many a time, I would say many dozens of times, all of a sudden the person goes with a tiny little voice, please don't send me to hell. Please. Pleaded, literally pleaded not to be sent into hell. I have been there. I've heard it many times. And so many of the people who did that work with us. Verse 26. And after crying out and convulsing him terribly, I've seen this many a time, it came out and the boy was like a corpse, so that most of them said he's dead. Verse 27, but Jesus took him by the hand and lifted him up, and he rose. He wasn't dead. He was just wiped out. And I want to tell you, at the end of some of those experiences that we have done, both in person and on Zoom, this is not atypical. It's wiping you out. Verse 28. And when he had entered the house, this is not his house in Capernaum, his disciples asked him privately. They wanted to know what happened here. And they said to him, why could we not cast it out? They had tried. And I have failed at times. There were times when I failed. Never could figure it out. Never understood why. But Jesus said to him, 29, and he said to them, this kind cannot be driven out by anything but prayer. King James Version adds by fasting, but that is not in the original, not even close by hundreds of years. By anything but prayer. Somehow the disciples just thought that they had the power to do it. That's what I think. They had the power to do it, and they said, we cast you out. It's by prayer, asking God, Lord, cast out these unclean spirits. I think that is what is going on. Luke ends the story with, and he gave him back to his father. Okay, I got to rush on. 3 verses, 6 minutes. Mark 9, verse 30, the second story, Jesus again foretells death, resurrection. Jesus is going to tell his disciples 3 times that he's going to be crucified, he's going to be dead, but he would be raised from the dead. This is the second time. Jesus again, verse 30, they went on from there and passed through Galilee. They're headed east into the area of the Decapolis on the other side, on the eastern side of the Jordan River. And it says, he did not want anyone to know, for he was teaching his disciples and saying to them, the Son of Man is going to be delivered into the hands of men, and they will kill him. Wow. That's quite a story. So here they are. Jesus is with his disciples. They're moving, and they're heading east, northeast, and so he was, and he kept it quiet. He needed to be alone with the 12. That was Jesus' primary ministry. Was not healing, was not casting out of demons, was teaching his disciples. And this is what I came to realize myself as well as a pastor. This is my primary thing to do, is to teach. And that's why of this television program. The first of which we started in the fall and winter of 1986. 1986. Or maybe, no, excuse me, I'm wrong. 1984. Started this in 1984 when I realized that I was going to become the pastor of what we changed the name to Miller Avenue Baptist Church in Mill Valley. And so I started doing the television work. And that was to communicate, to teach. That's what I saw as the most important. So, and so what is he teaching him? It says, the Son of Man is going to be delivered. He's preparing them for what's happening. They don't know. They have a hard time thinking that he's going to be killed. But he's telling them, I'm the Son of Man. That's a word that Jesus uses for himself. The Son of Man is going to be delivered into the hands of men, and they will kill him. He tells them, you guys, they're going to kill me. I'm going to be killed. Wow. I mean, they'd seen what Jesus could do. Raise the dead, cast out the demons, heal all manner of illness, and he's going to be killed. That's just not comprehensible. And when he is killed, after 3 days he will rise. 3 days, the Friday when he was crucified, Saturday in the grave, Sunday resurrected. After 3 days, he will rise. Okay. Verse 32, but they did not understand the saying and were afraid to ask him. Wait a minute, they're following this guy. They've seen him do all this stuff. He's going to be dead, but he says he's going to be resurrected. But how are they going to understand that? How could they even believe it? How could they go on with that? So this is the second time that Jesus tells them, and he's going to tell them one more time. It's kind of dangerous to be a follower of Jesus in our day today. Not only in America, but across the world. There are many people every day who are killed because they're followers of Jesus by any number of different religious groups. Any number of different religious groups. No acceptance. But the disciples were still hoping for a political liberator. We're doing that today. We're looking for a political liberator to make everything good. But that is not what it is. No president, dictator, supreme leader, whatever the name is, will save us. No government's going to save us. They may have some power for a while, but they're going to drop dead, and the government's going to change, and there's going to be the revolutions and the rebellions, etc., etc. And Jesus is not a political leader by any means. And we do not preach that sort of thing, although I know some do. All right, closing thoughts. Wow. We have a long time growing up as a Christian. And it's just the way it is. Being a Christian is not a simple thing. It's not a question of not having enough faith, but we live in a world that is very difficult to deal with. But I want to close out by saying to some of those who resonated with the first story about the demonic spirit coming out, Jesus casting him out, if I can, if possible, if you would like to contact me, and you'll be able to see how later, and you need that kind of ministry, perhaps I can be of help. So don't be afraid to do that, because I know for so many people there's no place to go, there's no help available. And so if any of you are in that situation, I welcome an email, so on.